Hello and welcome back to Seagulls Central. Thank you so much for clicking on this video, coming to watch my channel. My name is Adam MacDonald and welcome. If you're new here and you haven't seen my videos before, thank you so much for joining, clicking on this video and getting involved. And as always, if you've been here before, if you're a subscriber, if you're already involved in the community, thank you for returning. It really means a lot. All the support that this channel's been getting over the last few months has been amazing. It's been a really kind of fun and good summer for this channel. I feel like we've been able to bang out a lot of content and building a really nice community. So if you want to be part of the fastest growing Brighton and Hove Albion community on the internet, please hit that subscribe button. It really, really means a lot to me. Right, today we are going to be ranking every single Fabian Hürzeler signing since he joined the club. Well, it's over a year now, isn't it? It would have been. It ended up being pretty soon after De Zerbi left. Obviously, De Zerbi had announced his departure in that May time. I think it took about a month, and then Brighton had made that appointment well in time for the start of pre-season. So it's been a good year now that Brighton have had Hürzeler in charge. He's had 3 transfer windows. Obviously, last summer, the January transfer window, and then a good chunk of this summer transfer window as well. The caveat, I guess, to this entire video is that we all know how Brighton and Hove Albion's, transfer recruitment policy tends to work. It's obviously not Fabian Hürzeler's signings. We're not in the 90s anymore. We're not in the noughties anymore. It's not maybe Manchester United under Alex Ferguson, where the manager is the decision maker in terms of signings. Really nowadays for Brighton, the club are making signings for the manager. They're making signings for the club, but also signings that they know will really work well with the manager's style of play. And I think this summer particularly, the club's motive, purpose, intent has been to build Fabian Hürzeler a squad that suits his style, bring in players that suits his style, offload players who maybe aren't as suitable. It sounds like he's obviously making his decision on individual players on a match day, but in terms of the recruitment policy, it's not necessarily his kind of decision on who we bring in. But we have signed a lot of players since the start of last summer's transfer window. We signed around, in terms of men's first team senior players, we've signed around kind of 20 players who we'd signed kind of with view to bringing them into the first team. So there are a lot of players to get into and a lot of players to rank. I think one thing I'd sort of say before we start this is I think there's been a bit of a conversation, quite lightly, quite low level among the Brighton community. I think where maybe questions have been asked a little bit of the transfer policy in the last maybe year, 18 months. Obviously, it's no reflection on Hürzeler. It's maybe just talking generally about the way that the transfers have moved and that policy has moved. I think for years, for so long, Brighton have been lauded as the perfect club in terms of their transfers. What was kind of brought up in some of the conversations I'd heard and seen was that actually, do you think it's been maybe a little bit overstated in recent months? Maybe since we lost Sam Jewell in, February 2024, the last kind of 18 months maybe haven't been as brilliant. We've signed a lot of good players, but we're yet to really see those kind of real gems emerge through for us. And there's been a few misses in there as well. You think of, it's hard to say, but maybe players like Cashin. And there are others in there as well. Lots of them struggle to come to mind. But I think also the fact that we're kind of stockpiling players in positions, particularly last summer, it felt like we were signing a lot of forwards. I don't know. I'd like to know what you think. Do you think whether the transfer policy has kind of changed over the last few years? Has it got worse? Has it got better? Right, let's get straight into it. We're going to go literally chronological order. First signing, and this one's a bit of a cheat because I suppose it's not really a men's first team player, but I think he was signed with intent to play in the men's first team, and that's Amario Cozier-Duberry. Obviously signed last summer from Arsenal's under-21s. He was out of contract, largely spoken about among the Arsenal fans as potentially kind of back up to Saka, the next Saka in their academy, a left-footed right winger. I think there was a lot of hype and hope and expectation in the Arsenal academy. We obviously saw him in Japan. That's the only real kind of sign that we as Brighton fans have seen him in an Albion shirt. And I thought he looked really good. Do you remember some of those goals he scored on the right-hand side? Cutting in, finishing, looking really, really assured, accomplished. Finishing with aplomb, just a real calmness in front of goal. He obviously went out on loan last season. We saw him at Blackburn. He had a bit of a kind of higgledy-piggledy season in terms of coming in and out with injuries, not being able to necessarily see the best of him. He signed for Bolton on loan this transfer window. around 21 years old. He looks really good. I think I'm going to have to rate this one around a C, just because we've not seen him in a Brighton shirt. And it's not like we paid if we paid big money for him and then he couldn't get in the side and we had to send him out on loan, you have to say, well, fair enough. But the guy's coming out of Arsenal's academy. He's probably one for the future. Maybe one that we'll just look to make profit on, buying a free player, finding a good opportunity in the market to bring in a free player who's young, loan him out and then sell him on for profit. So I think, we can only really kind of say it's been okay. It's been fine. It's not been a bad transfer. It's not been a good transfer. We're yet to see the best of him. Obviously, he's not been disappointing at all. But there does look like there is real promise there, particularly in pre-season last season. I thought it was very impressive. So I think what we're going to do with Amario Cozier-Duberry is give him a C. Right, let's move on. Malick Yalcouye. Obviously, we signed him. We signed him last summer? We signed him last summer for around 15 million quid, central midfielder. Again, a player who we've not seen in a Brighton shirt properly yet. We've seen him quite a lot this pre-season. We saw him quite a lot last pre-season and he looked really, really good. 16 million quid for a young player playing in central midfield. Now, it seems, if we're just being completely honest, I feel like we all kind of have felt like Malick Yalcouye is the next one off the conveyor belt in terms of that Basuma, Caicedo into Baleba into Yalcouye. And when we move these players on, they're the players who step. And I think Yalcouye will be one who will, in the next year, 18 months, 2 years, put on a Brighton shirt and be that starting central midfielder in a defensive role for Brighton. We've seen this pre-season. He looks really good. He's not necessarily a real ball winner. I don't think he's a absolute destroyer in the middle of the park in the same way that a Baleba or a Caicedo was. I think he's a little bit more of a sitter and a player and a passer and a switcher. A bit more, you don't want to make these comparisons, and I don't mean it in terms of quality, but I think I've said it before in terms of style. It's a bit more of a Busquets role, kind of sitting deep, passing, ticking over the play, building up the ball for Brighton. And he looks really, really good. I think I'd be surprised if we're going to see him in a Brighton shirt this season. All the talk is that he's going to go out on loan again, and I think that probably is the best for his development. The club want to give him a few loans before they then throw him into the first team, a bit like they did with Carlos Baleba, having to throw him in straight away as soon as we signed him. And actually, his first season, it probably took him a while to build in. So I think they want to give him that game time. They want to see him develop. He obviously played Champions League football last season. I think so far for Brighton, this has been a good signing in the sense that it feels like there's more chance that this guy is going to slot in. And we're seeing him not just one, but 2 pre-seasons in a row look like a really assured quality player. He's played at a very good level. Comparing it to like a Cozier-Duberry where we give him a C. Actually, this guy's playing in the Champions League. He's had really good experience and he probably is ready to play Premier League football, but we just don't have the opportunities for him. So I think probably a European loan this season will be what he gets. Maybe a Championship loan. He could even play in the bottom half of the Premier League. I think it'd be really interesting if we saw him go to like a Leeds or a one of the promoted sides. I think that would be really interesting. I think I'm going to give this one a B just because there feels like there is a lot more promise in terms of what we're going to get out of Malick Yalcouye. It feels like a player who will turn out to be what we all think he's going to be. We've seen him play at a very good level and we're likely in the next year or so going to see him put on a Brighton shirt. So it's a B for me for the signing of Malick Yalcouye. Ibrahim Osman. So this was a signing obviously we made last summer, 30 million quid. From Nordsjælland, the same team as Simon Adingra. Now this one, I think I'm going to say this is so far has been a poor signing for Brighton. It's been a bit of a suspect one, only because we've obviously sent him out on loan again this season to France, but we've included kind of an option to buy, and it seems like one of those ones where they actually will buy him. It's kind of an obligation to buy by all the reports. A young player, obviously coming in from Nordsjælland, looking like one of their best talents. You look at the highlights from him before he signed for us. He looked like the next Simon Adingra, the way he was tearing up that league. But we saw him in pre-season. I remember watching him at QPR last year, and he looked decent. But he just couldn't really get in the side. We sent him out on loan. He didn't have a great year. He went to Feyenoord for a year and didn't have a great year. And we're moving him on kind of less than a year later for reduced money. I think in terms of a transfer, if he does end up going permanently, I think we've got to say it's probably quite a poor move for Brighton, this one. I think often, the model does rely on buying players for cheap money, hoping that they're going to turn into something big and better and great. Maybe that be on loan or with Brighton. But I think in this case, they've obviously made a judgment on him, sent him out on loan into Europe, maybe seen him in training And clearly there's something there, a bit like the Barco situation where we'd signed him and then kind of realised that actually maybe it's a personality thing, maybe it's a quality and training thing. They're not quite what we want them to be. They're not quite up to it. And you move them on for either the same amount of money or slightly less with amortization, etc. It kind of works out on your balance sheet as the same as kind of breaking even. So for this one, I think it is maybe, you have to say, a bit of a poor transfer, because if we are just going to be in a position where we move him on next year as part of that obligation to buy, what was the point in this deal? So actually, I think I'm going to give this one so far a D. I think a disappointing move, particularly based on what we thought this was going to be. I think for me, I felt it was going to be a player who might have come straight into the side. But actually, it didn't turn out to be that. He struggled. We're moving him on. It's going to have to be a D for me. Right, let's move on to the next one. Matt O'Reilly. Matt O'Reilly obviously signing for 25 million quid from Celtic last summer, getting injured pretty much straight away, being one of the best players for Celtic last season, scoring the season before last, scoring so many goals, looking like an absolute engine in the midfield. We've not seen the best of him yet. That's, to be frank. I think this pre-season, we are seeing the signs that he's going to be a very important player. Obviously, we've spoken before around how he's had those conversations with Fabian Hürzeler around the role that he wants to play this season. He wants to be playing more centrally this season. He doesn't want to be, adopted out as a winger, like we saw him at times last season, having to fill a role at right wing. So far, what can you say? Have we seen the best of him? No. Does he look like a good player? Yes. Have we seen that in the Premier League? Not massively, to be fair. We've seen signs that he looks okay, but we've not seen hugely promising signs from him. I think the thing that we're all clutching on for at the moment is the fact that we've seen him have a very good pre-season this year. So far, for 25 million quid, for the age profile, for the homegrown talent that he brings to our squad as well, in terms of, I think he went through the academy at MK Dons, therefore qualifying as a homegrown talent, I think I'm going to say this has been a decent signing, but there still needs to be improvement on this. We need to see a little bit more. You can tell it's going to be a good signing. He's an international. He's obviously at the level where he can play Premier League football. I don't think there's a doubt about that, but we do just need to see a little bit more. So I'm going to give this one probably a B as well, because I think there are signs there that this will become a very good player. However, at this stage, we're not quite there yet. He obviously struggled in his first season, and if he hadn't with that injury, maybe it'd be a different story. But I think at this point, all we can really do is give this one a B and hope for the best. Right, okay, moving on. Let's move on to the next one. I think interestingly around this whole topic, we're going to have a lot of players who've obviously been signed this summer who we've really not seen the most of, even players like Tommy Watson and Seamus, who we technically signed kind of in January, but we haven't seen them either. So it's going to be hard to make judgments on them, but I'm going to really mainly focus on kind of making grades for the players that we have seen a lot, and mainly the players that we signed last season and in the January transfer window. So let's move on. Ferdi Kadioglu, obviously we signed him from Fenerbahce last summer, 24 years old at the time, signed him for around 25.5 million quid. Again, look, one of those players, like was one of the best players in Turkey a couple of seasons ago, has a huge following. I think from the club brand perspective, it's a great signing. Look, he was another one where his first season with Brighton has ultimately just been scuppered by injuries. We've not seen the best from him. So it's difficult for us to sit here and really make a genuine assessment on what kind of signing this has been. So far at this point, it's probably been quite a disappointing signing just because of the lack of game time that we've had from Ferdi Kadioglu. However, my true opinion is that he is going to be a very important player this season, a player who can play both at left back and right back, obviously wing back as well, can score goals, can get forward, and we've seen in the signs, I remember being at Liverpool away last season when he scored. Did he score a goal? I think he did, didn't he? Or did he assist? I've just got a real vision of him being a real part of that game, and I think it was not long after that we obviously saw him get injured. That was around that time, actually, would have been November 2024 when he got that injury. He's been out for a good 9 months or so, and we haven't seen the best of him. So at this point, you probably have to say it's been about a C in terms of the signing. It's ultimately not lived up to the potential. It's not like a Matt O'Reilly, where I think we've seen a bit more flashes from him. Obviously, we saw Matt O'Reilly play the vast majority of the second half of last season, at least in cameos and appearances, etc. We've really not seen that with Ferdi Kadioglu. So I think at this point, you've got to give it a C. I think generally we will find out that this deal will turn into being like an A. I do think that this is going to be a very, very astute deal. 25 million quid for a player who's got such creative attacking output, can play on the left-hand side. It's a unique position, a unique role, and I think this year he will light up the Premier League. I think this could become an A, but I think at this point, Sadly, I think we've got to say only because we've not seen enough of him yet, but we know there's potential there. I think we're going to say this one's a C. Right, let's move on. Let me get my list. Brajan Gruda. Okay, so he signed from Mainz last summer. 25 million quid again. I think it was about 26 million quid. We're talking around 30 million euros for this deal. 20 years old, signed from Mainz, German under-21 international. His first season, I think, for me, has been very promising. I've heard a lot of people recently talk about the comparisons between Facundo Buonanotte and Brajan Gruda and who do people prefer. In my opinion, I do think that maybe Brajan Gruda has a bit of a higher ceiling. I like Buonanotte. I think he's a very good player, but I think in the first let's say Brajan Gruda featured in half of our games last season, I think I've seen a bit more and I've seen a quicker and faster development from Brajan Gruda than I maybe did with someone like Facundo Buonanotte. I think Gruda certainly did look a little bit lightweight in his first few games, really up until about Christmas, even maybe until about February, March. He did look lightweight. He looked like he wasn't up to speed with the Premier League, but to be fair to Hürzeler, he was giving him minutes. I really like him. I think we're going to see him play, obviously, mainly as probably a right winger going into this season, maybe as a kind of Minteh backup. It's clear to me that his best position is probably a 10, but I think Matt O'Reilly, Georginio Rutter will be the players competing for that position. But I do really like this signing, and I think for the price, for the age profile, from what we've got from him so far, from the signs he's shown, I like him. Very technical. I speak about it a lot, but I think he's got that similar kind of gait and style and touch to kind of Phil Foden has. So I'm going to say this one has been a B. I think it's a good signing. I think it's a signing that we will see the best of in the coming years. There's obviously huge potential there. There's an opportunity for him to develop, and I think at 25 million quid, clearly what it is, it's a sign that Brighton are kind of changing slightly the way that they recruit. It's no longer trying to get the 5 and 6, 7, 8 million pound players and sell them on for 80 million. It's now actually, you're prepared to kind of go and get players which at big money will be able to produce the goods kind of almost instantly, like someone like a Rutter, like a Minteh. You go and pay 30 million, 40 million quid for these players and you'll still be able to double your money. Same with João Pedro. Before we might have gone and got a Neil Mormay for like 5 million quid and hoped we could maybe make 15 million quid, or Moises Caicedo for 3 million quid and turn it into 100 million quid. I think now the move kind of is get those 30 million pound players, get those 40 million pound players who we know can hit the ground running. It doesn't take a year, half a year for them to bed in. And then we can still sell them for big money. I suppose the thing with Gruda is that we are still looking for that development, but I think maybe it's a little bit more of a surefire kind of deal that will work out than maybe other ones in the past. So yeah, I'll give that one. I think I gave it a B, did I? I hope I got that right. Right, Mats Wiefer, Feyenoord, 27 million quid. Again, 30 million quid. So you look at these prices, we're spending good dough on these players. 27 odd million quid for Mats Wiefer, obviously defensive midfielder. I like him. I really like him. For me, if he was on top form, and he could play in the form that I kind of feel that he can play, that his style of player would actually be the style of player, like prime Mats Wiefer, what we know he could be or has been in the past, would be the player I'd want to play alongside a Carlos Baleba. Now, maybe that's just my preference in style, and you might personally prefer a Jack Hinshelwood or an Ayari. Obviously love those players, but maybe a little bit more energetic, maybe running more into the box. But I really like Wiefer. I like the way he ticks the ball over. I like the way he's physical. He's big. I think he just looked like a player who, for a long time for Brighton, looked very nervous on the ball, looked quite uncomfortable, particularly in the first 8 months of being at Brighton. I think, you think back to that Wolves game where he made bad decisions. I think those moments probably did affect him a little bit. And I think he looked unconfident. He looked nervous. And I think we haven't seen the best of him. Obviously, we're seeing him a lot at right back in these pre-season games against Stoke, against Las Palmas. We saw him at right back. I don't love that, to be honest with you. I would like to see him in midfield. I can see why it makes sense. He's big, he's tall, he's a unit. He can get forward, he passes very well. I think at this point, it's been a good signing. It's been an okay signing. But if we're going to be completely honest, it's probably not been a good enough signing yet for what Brighton need and for the price they're paying and for what we've kind of come to expect for kind of Brighton signings in the last few years. I'm going to say for this one, I'm going to probably give it a C, just because I think we haven't seen the best of him. And he's not playing in a position that I think suits him still. I think this season probably will be one where we go, you know what, Matt Sweefer, what a player. And there were moments towards the end of last season where I was tweeting stuff like, Matt Sweefer, what an unbelievable performance this guy's putting in. And I think he clearly is a confidence player. But I think at this point, from what we've seen, it probably is a C. Yeah. All right, Yankuba Minteh, let's move on from him. Let's hope we don't move on from him. Let's move on to him. Signed from Newcastle United, 30 million quid. Obviously, that was one of those last season when Newcastle needed to sell for their PSR. He'd never played a game for them. They were probably reluctant but prepared to sell in order to make that money. Brighton took a bit of a risk, really, having never seen him play top-flight football in England. But spending good money on him, and goodness me, this looks like an absolute fantastic signing. I've made a prediction a few videos ago talking about how I think Yankuba Minteh is going to be Brighton's player of the season going into this year. I think, what we've seen last season is a player with so much potential, a player who can, I've said it before, but for a young player who, they're often raw, they're often a bit snatchy at shots and stuff. He's clinical, he's ruthless, he makes good decisions, he works hard. I really like him. I think this season, after having a year to bed into the Premier League, I think he's going to come out with a real kind of impetus and momentum. And I think we're going to see the best of him this season. I think for the price we paid, for the age profile, and for the kind of uniqueness of him, to have a goal-scoring winger who can hit the ground running, it's quite unique. So for me, Yankuba Minteh gets, I'm going to say an A. I think he does get an A for me. I think it's been a very good signing, I think. Good, not crazy money, a good age profile, and crucially, he's hit the ground running straight away. So for me, he is our first A of this video. Right, let's move on. This guy might be joining him in the A category. It's the one and only Georginio Rutter, obviously signed for the best part of 40 million quid from Leeds United last summer. I think it was around 39 million quid. Do you remember that bomber when it dropped? I think it was Fabrizio or maybe Ornstein dropped it. It was like late at night, I remember, one evening on like a Thursday, towards the end of the transfer window, and we'd brought him in 40 million quid, and we'd already spent a lot of money. By this point, we brought in Kadioglu, Gruda, Weaver, Minteh. We'd probably spent over £100 million at this point, and then we go and drop another 40 million quid on Georginio Rutter, one of the best players in the Championship, one of the best players for Leeds when they were in the Premier League. Looked like a good, promising Premier League player. For me, it was between him and JP Van Hecke for my player of the season last season. He was absolutely brilliant. I've said it before, he's got that talismanic way about him. He can score goals, he can dribble, he can create goals. He encapsulates, that was what Leeds fans said to me when we signed him, but it's so true. He encapsulates the kind of vibes of a team. When he's playing well, you find your team's playing well. Everything kind of seems to go through him. He's got that real way about him of just like, it is talismanic, isn't it? He's like the focal point of a team, even though he's not necessarily a target or anything. He just has that way about him where everything kind of seems to go through him. He hit the ground running immediately. He scored goals. You think back to that Man United game quite early on when he was so involved in that game, and the goals that we scored, scoring some crucial goals against big teams. Now that João Pedro's gone this season, I think we're going to see him really step up. For me, this absolutely is an A signing. No doubt about it. A top player, a player who we're going to see kick on again at only, 22 years old again, playing in a variety of positions. But there's massive opportunity for resale value there if the club were ever looking to sell him in probably the next couple of years. So for me, this signing is, without a doubt, an A for Georginio Rutter. Right, let's move on. This is now when we leave the summer transfer window of 24-25, and we move in to the winter transfer window of 2025, January 2025 that we had. I was going to say just had. We've definitely not just had about 6-7 months ago. In this window, we brought in Eiran Cashin, and we saw formally Diego Gómez signed for the club. Obviously, he technically kind of came in the summer, but we'll just say that he came in the winter because that's when we began to see him. So those two players, obviously, we've only really seen half a season from them. Let's start with Eiran Cashin because he technically, I think, actually, no, he wouldn't have. That's just made up. I was going to say he came in first. Obviously, he didn't. Anyway, let's start with Eiran Cashin. Around 9-10 million quid from Derby County. One of their best players, a player who Brighton had been tracking for a long time. We signed him at the age of 23. We'd been tracking him since around 2021, 2022. So a good 3-4 years at this point by the time we signed him. I think you've got to say this has been a poor signing so far. Brighton after he obviously got sent out on loan to Birmingham City last week, going to be playing for a newly promoted Championship side. This should be a good loan for him. They came out through Andy Naylor and said that, Cashin is regarded as a player for the future, a long-term investment, which I think is interesting because by all accounts, I think we all agree it does seem a weird signing, the Eiran Cashin signing. It feels like one where, they say it was data-led, but we've ultimately just not seen the best of him. And I think a lot of people did say at the time, this guy is someone who looks great on paper and looks great in the stats, but even Derby County fans were saying, I'm not sure if he is a Premier League player. And obviously I remember seeing him at the AMEX. I think it was his first game. He got spun by Rashford, spun by Asensio, looked completely out of his depth. And clearly in the weeks and months since then, wasn't able to prove to Fabian Hürzeler that he was able to step up, even when we had kind of Lewis Dunk unavailable and Igor unavailable and Jan Paul van Hekke suspended in moments. He didn't really get much of an opportunity in the Premier League. This pre-season, I thought he did look decent. He's very aggressive in the way he kind of goes in and heads the ball. For what he lacks in height, he makes up for in that real kind of engine and authority in the way he plays. But I think at this point, it has been a poor signing. It's one that doesn't really make sense. We've brought a young player in. You'd think they'd be coming in to compete. You'd think, it came at a time, to be fair, when we were trying to sign Victor Reis. Was he playing in Brazil, I think, at the time? Or Portugal? I can't remember. Obviously, Man City went on to sign him. He's barely played for them, to be fair to them. And I think we obviously lost out to Reis in the January transfer window, and we ended up going for Cashin and making that concerted effort for Cashin, a player who we had. Clearly the club maybe felt, look, this guy Reis is our first choice, but actually if we need someone to come in and support us this season at centre-half, a young centre-half, let's make an investment. We'll just go for a player who we've been tracking for a while, we like the look of, but maybe they weren't 100% sure about him. Maybe they just think, you know what, if we can double our money, maybe he has a really good season in the Championship this season, then Birmingham want to buy him for 15, 20 million quid. They've made money off him. It's not a bad deal. At this point, though, I think it does just feel like a bit of a weird one, a bit of a pointless one. Yes, we did need those numbers, to be fair. We needed those numbers last season. There was a moment in January where those injuries were really rough at the back, and we did need extra bodies in defence. However, this summer, with us signing Diego Coppola, with us signing Olivier Biscaglia, obviously having JP and then Lewis Dunk and Igor and sadly Webster, but we would have thought we would have had Webster. There are a lot of options, and I think it was always going to be that he wasn't be able to get minutes. So I think at this point, we've got to say it's probably been quite a weird signing. I don't want to say it's been a poor signing because I think that's too harsh to say at this point. But I think it has been a weird signing. I think at this point, I'm going to say that this signing's probably C-. I don't want to do minuses and pluses. I'm going to be harsher. I'm going to say a D, just because I think ultimately, I don't think we'll see him play regularly in a Brighton shirt in the Premier League. I know there are the reports that he's viewed as a long-term target, but ultimately, I think he probably won't make it for Brighton in the Premier League, at least in the next few years. Maybe I'll be proven wrong on that one, but I think this one is a D. Right. Sorry, shouldn't have had lunch before I made this video. Right, let's move on. Diego Gómez, obviously signed him for Inter Miami. The price around 10, 11 million pounds. This guy looks mustard. I really, really like the look of Diego Gómez. Obviously, he only played kind of half of last season. We didn't see a full season out of him, but I think this season we're going to see him really kick on, really build from what he's got. He's got that energy, he's got the passing range, he's got the ability to hold on to the ball. Just looks quality, looks classy, and I think he's going to be a big part of our midfield this season. I really like the signing so far. It's difficult because we haven't really seen him properly in the heart of this midfield, playing every single game, being a massive part of the team. But I think for the price, for the age profile, 21-year-old, 11 million quid, able to immediately come into the Premier League and just look like a player. I'm going to say it's a B+++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++ don't think we can quite say A just because we've not seen him really become a crucial part of this side. But he's become a part of this side and he's looked good. So I think it's fair enough that we give him at this point a B. I think this season coming up, we're going to see him kick on. He's going to have a big season. So I think, I'm excited to see what Diego Gómez can do in the next few months and in the next year for Brighton. Now, we move on to this summer's window, and I'm conscious that it's very difficult to grade all of these players. We've got Seamas, we've got Buscaglia, we've got Do Young Yoon, we've got Coppola, we've got Watson, we've got De Cuyper, and we've got Costellas. I'm going to go through them all very briefly here. So Seamas and Costilas, I'm going to take them as a 2. I think these are difficult ones to grade. At this point, I'm probably going to give them, I think their signing probably is about a B. I think they look clinical. They look like they're hungry. They look exciting. But we've paid big money for them. 29 million quid for Costilas, 20 million quid for Seamas. They're young, they're unproven. We don't really know what they're going to give us at this point. So I think you've got to say it's kind of a B. It's an unknown quantity, but on paper, it doesn't look like we've massively overpaid. We're trying to replace goals for decent money. We're obviously replacing someone like João Pedro, who's a real goal scorer, so it's very difficult to really say. But I think at this point, you can only really say a B. I don't think we've necessarily been ripped off. I don't think we've paid under the odds for an amazing player. But I think these guys will be a part of this squad this season. But I think anyone who's kind of got the idea that they're going to come in and straight away be huge parts of this side, I don't know. I'd love to be proven wrong on that, but I'm just not so sure. Buscagli and Coppola, I think both of these players are going to prove to be kind of top signings. I think particularly Coppola, 21 years old, Italian international, obviously played for the under-21s as well. Signing him for around 9-10 million quid. I think this is really a bargain deal. So much potential, huge resale value in terms of what he can offer. Looks like a Rolls Royce, looks Van Dijk-esque. I think his signing and Buscagli's signing have been very, very good. Buscagli, obviously a free transfer, a player we've tracked for a while. Leadership qualities, left-sided. For me, I'm going to give both of these players an A, just because I feel like what they offer, the role we're going to see them play this season, I think they're going to have big roles this season. I think they're going to have opportunities. They're going to be involved in ways that maybe we're not so sure about for the other players, and there's probably less pressure on them than there is kind of someone like Costilas or Seamas. Do Young Yoon, it's really hard to say at this point. We've not seen him. He's obviously gone out on loan to Rotterdam in the Dutch league. He's trying to get his work permit. I'm going to give him a C just because, we've not paid huge money for him. We've paid like 1-2 million quid for him. And he's certainly one for the future. 18 years old, looked like a very promising player in South Korea. So I think you've got to give it a C because it's really an unknown quantity at this point. Tommy Watson, I really like this signing. We obviously got him for around 10 million quid as well from Sunderland. I think he's going to be an excellent addition to this squad. Obviously playing alongside Kaoru Mitoma. He'll be supporting Kaoru Mitoma, I imagine, as a left-sided winger and just adds more options to our attack. Obviously, we've lost Simon Adingra, and I think long-term we will see this as an upgrade to Simon Adingra. For decent money, we've made about 10 million quid on that deal. I think I really like this signing. At this point, I'm going to give it around a B, just because obviously there is that unknown quantity, but he looked like a fantastic player in the Championship, a player who can provide genuine competition in terms of quality, but also in terms of style to Kaoru Mitoma. He plays quite similarly in the way he dribbles the ball, gets forward, scores goals, gets us up the pitch, carries the ball, gains territory. So I do really like the signing. I'm going to give this one a B, purely because we don't know kind of what we're going to see from him. But in terms of what we've seen last year, the fact he's done it in English football, the fact he's young, the fact we've made good money on him, in terms of selling Adingra as well, I think this transfer on paper looks like around a B. The final one that I've got here, I'm pretty sure this is the final one. Yeah, Maxim De Cuyper, obviously 17 million quid from Club Brugge. I guess when you compare it to what we've sold in Pervis Estupiñán for the same price, 17 million quid, it's really an unknown quantity. This guy looks very good. He looks like an attacking fullback. He looks electric. He looks like he gets up and down. He looks like he's got an engine. But at this point in time, he's an unknown quantity. He's 24 years old. He's played in the Champions League, to be fair to him. He's played at a good level, and we've got a few years on him. We're basically signing Purvis again. We signed Purvis at 24 years old and then sold him at like 24, 27, 28. That's kind of what we're happening now. We're buying a left back for the same price that we sold Purvis for, at the same age that we signed Purvis for. So it feels like a real kind of conveyor belt here. It's hard to say. I think this seems like a good deal. It seems like a good price for the experience and the quality and the way that this guy can play clearly as a left wing back in a back three. I'm going to give this one around a B as well, but there's such an unknown quantity to this as well. I do have faith that he's going to be a big player this season. I think he's going to be the starting left back. I think it's going to be up to Ferdi Kadioglu to dislodge Maxim De Cuyper, to be honest. It seems like Fabian Hürzeler really does like him, but we don't really know. So to conclude, I think really in the last kind of year or so that we've had Fabian Hürzeler at the club and we've seen all the signings come in the post-De Zerbi era, I think overall I'm probably it's interesting that most of the rankings are around that kind of like B to C kind of range. There's a couple of A's, Rutter, Minteh, but a lot of them are kind of B, C's, waiting for the potential to be realised. I think it's been a good couple of windows. I think the window, particularly last year, we bought a lot of players, we spent a lot of money, but we know that there's a lot of potential there. We know in the next year, this coming season, we're probably going to see the best of them. And I think it makes us really excited for this season. Yes, there's been a few kind of false dawns in terms of the signings. Maybe someone like Eiran Cashin not quite living up to what we'd kind of expected with him. But there looks like some really brilliant players we've not even properly seen yet. Coppola, Buscagli, Tommy Watson. Really excited to see them. The two Greek lads, Simas, Kostilas. And obviously all the brilliant players that we signed last summer. So overall, I think if I had to give all of the signings as one kind of a grade, I'd probably give it a B. I don't think you can necessarily say they've all been hits, but maybe in a year's time we might be sat here and lots of those Bs will be As and lots of those Cs will be Bs or As. Because you can definitely see the potential that these signings have, and Brighton spending good money on players now. And we are seeing it. We've got a very, very, very talented squad. Let me know what you think. Do you think I've been too harsh on any of these players? Do you think I've been too kind on these signings? Which ones do you think have been more successful or less successful than the ones that I've kind of mentioned? I'd love to know your thoughts. Let me know in the comments. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit a like. Drop me a subscription. It really means a lot. I know it's difficult and annoying for me to sometimes ask, but literally if you could just tap that button, move your mouse to the subscribe button, hit that button, it would really mean a lot to me. It helps me grow this channel, helps me be able to produce this content regularly, and I really genuinely, all the comments mean so much. I love reading them, I love replying to everyone, getting involved. It feels like a real community, so I really do appreciate you getting involved and watching and loving it and just soaking it up. So thank you so much. Let me know what you think. Am I talking rubbish? I'd love to know. I'll see you on the next one. Thank you very much for watching. And as always, up the Albion.